The last step to prepare you for your final watercolor painting is a watercolor practice activity. For this, you are going to be painting an apple. Now I have an image here that I printed. You can just do a Google search of an apple. Draw it out lightly because pencil lines can still show through your watercolor paint. Now what I'm doing first here is I am adding the white highlights that I see within the apple. So there are a couple different places that I feel like should stay white, so I've got that white crayon on there. Now some of these steps might look a little bit crazy, but you have to remember that watercolor painting is done in layers, and I'm not going to show you the entire apple being done here in one step. It's going to take quite a bit of time and layers. Now the first thing I'm doing is I am adding some violet paint where I see the darkest shadows in the apple. Now I want to make sure that I spread this paint out so that it looks relatively light to add those shadows, because a red will eventually be on top, but I want to make the edges look soft as well so that it doesn't look like it has a hard edge. Now as you work, don't be afraid to add colors that you don't really think belong inside your apple. That violet underneath the red is going to have some, shadow effect. But you can use yellow, you can use orange, you can use green in different places within your apple, so that again you're not just painting with a flat red. Where your colors transition together is probably the most important place to not overlook. Make sure you go over those areas with a wet brush to help them blend together a little bit more. As you work, you want to try to make sure you don't have the entire apple wet at the same time, because then everything will just start to kind of puddle and pool together. Watercolor paint does absorb relatively quickly into watercolor paper. It is intended to be used and gotten wet. As your paper gets wet, it may warp a little bit, or not lay flat, but that will lessen over time as well. Now as you're working, do not forget, try different things. It's okay if you do something that you think isn't perfect. This is to gain some experience, to hopefully give you some knowledge and some practice, before you do your final watercolor painting. So don't be afraid to try things, even if you're not 100% sure if you think that they're going to work. Now this apple, is not finished yet, but it's got a pretty good start to it. I could use some salt on the top layer to try to give the apple some more texture. I could, do some scratched lines. I could even see what saran wrap would look like or blotting would look like. But this is just an attempt to try to make something look a little bit more realistic and showing that you can use different techniques while doing it. When this practice activity is complete and all of your boot camps are complete, gather those 4 papers up and show me your work in order to get your watercolor painting project planning sheet.